Sit in the back, Ava. Let today be about Dana. That was the first thing my father said to me in public that year, and he said it loud enough for every decorated guest in the Navy chapel to hear. My name is Ava Morgan. I wore the same uniform once. I served like my sister did, just not in a way my father ever acknowledged. Dana was the Ellis family pride, a combat pilot, a commander. She died in service 3 weeks ago, and today they were honoring her. But there was no seat saved for me, not in the front row, not in the program, not in the story they told about her. I stood in the aisle, frozen. People turned to look. Most looked away just as fast. My mother didn't even blink. And in that moment, surrounded by medals, flags, and all the praise they saved for my sister, I realized something. They weren't just burying her memory. They were burying the truth. My father believed in service, but only the kind you could salute. He respected boots on tarmac, medals on chests, stripes on shoulders. He respected the kind of service that made noise, the kind that flew above cities and made people look up. He never respected mine. I was a signals analyst, a specialist in comms integrity. My battlefield wasn't the sky, it was silence, patterns, static, the tiny inconsistencies that most people ignored. I didn't wear a flight suit. I didn't shout commands over radio towers. I studied echoes. I tracked anomalies. I repaired systems no one ever saw until they failed. Dana used to call me her wizard. Quiet, sharp, a little strange. She was the only one who saw my kind of work as anything close to brave. My father called it desk work. Safe, soft. He never said it to my face. He didn't need to. It was in the way he stood when Dana entered a room. In the way he straightened her uniform without asking. In the way he once told me that courage lived in the chest, not in code. That morning at the chapel, I sat 3 rows behind my own mother. She didn't turn around. I wasn't sure if she didn't notice me or chose not to. Dana's name echoed through the eulogy. Her ranks, her hours, her flight records, her citations. No one mentioned the relay fix she had asked me for. The one that kept her comms stable through a blackout drill 2 weeks before her final mission. No one mentioned that she had trusted me with her flight protocols when she wasn't sure the new system was calibrated. No one mentioned me at all, and maybe I could have accepted that, but I couldn't shake one thing. Dana knew I mattered. She made sure I knew it too. That knowledge sat with me like a small, sharp stone, not painful, just enough to keep me from going numb, and I knew something else. Whatever happened to her up there didn't make sense. I still have the voicemail. 2 days before the crash, Dana called me. She was mid-briefing, judging by the clipped tone in her voice, the hum of wind and static in the background. "Hey, nerd, just wanted to say your fix saved our relay today. Again. I might owe you something sparkly if I ever make it out of this mess." There was a pause. I could hear her breath catch. "Dad's probably going to bulldoze you at the memorial. Ignore him. I see you. I always have." Then a laugh, a real one. Light and fast. She hung up before I could call back. I played it the night before the ceremony, 3 times, in the dark. Her voice was clearer than anything else I remembered that week. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a thread. Something unfinished, something left to follow. Dana wasn't the kind of person who joked before a flight unless she was confident. She was cautious, sharp, methodical. She triple-checked every checklist down to the last digit. So when they told me, it was a weather malfunction, rotor instability, a sudden wind shear, I nodded politely, but deep down, something pulled at me. Dana wouldn't have flown through storm airspace without reason. And if she had to, she would have sent me a note. A ping, something, but she didn't, just that voicemail. And something in it told me this wasn't over. Not for her, not for me. They said it was the storm, unexpected turbulence. Rotor destabilization. A training accident, they called it. Routine, tragic but not suspicious. I tried to believe them. But something about Dana's flight path kept circling in my mind, like static that wouldn't clear. She had sent me a test manifest a week before the crash, a modified relay corridor I had helped configure. It was supposed to avoid high-interference zones, a clean path, safe. But when I saw the location of her crash in the post-briefing map, my stomach sank. She hadn't been anywhere near the test corridor. She had flown straight into a known signal disruption zone, one flagged twice for relay calibration errors in the last quarter. That didn't line up, not with her protocol, not with her caution, not with anything I knew about how she flew. For most people, that would have been grief talking. Paranoia, a brain scrambling to make sense of loss. But I work in signals. And there's one rule that's never failed me. Anomalies don't lie. That night, I powered up my old reserve laptop. I wasn't on active duty anymore, but I still had access to limited archives. Enough to reach the relay data Dana had once shared with me for peer review. Just one packet. I decrypted it, slow and careful. Dana always double-scrambled her logs. Inside, I found it. A transponder echo, then a second overlapping it by less than 2 seconds. Double ping, followed by drift. That kind of signal misalignment didn't happen randomly. It meant rerouting, manual override. Something or someone had redirected her relay mid-flight, and no one had mentioned that, not in the report, not in the press briefing. Not even in the internal chatter I still picked up from old channels. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I saved the file. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew this much. Something didn't add up, and someone was hoping I wouldn't notice. The next morning, I poured coffee like everything was normal. The house was quiet, heavy with the kind of stillness that follows ceremonies and unspoken things. My father stood at the counter reading the paper like it was a tactical report. My mother washed dishes she had already cleaned. I waited until the mug in my hand stopped shaking. Then I asked, casual as I could, "Did the board release a preliminary yet?" My father didn't look up. "They're handling it." His voice was flat. Final, I tried again. "There's a log from Dana's relay. Something's off about the route she flew." That got his attention. He lowered the paper, slowly. "You're not cleared to review anything," he said, "and you weren't there." I met his eyes. "I designed the relay she used. I know the corridor. She was off it by over 40 nautical miles." He set his mug down harder than necessary. "Stop." I didn't. "There's a double ping in her data. Transponder drift. That only happens with a manual reroute or signal corruption. But the weather report was clean until she entered that dead zone. So why was she there?" His jaw tightened. "You're speculating, and that doesn't honor her." "No," I said quietly, "but covering it up doesn't either." He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The silence that followed felt louder than any argument we had ever had. My mother stood between us, hands still wet from dishes. She didn't speak. She never did when we reached this edge. My father walked out without another word. The screen door slammed hard enough to rattle the magnets on the fridge. One of them clattered to the floor. I picked it up. It was a faded picture of Dana in uniform. Pinned beside it had once been mine. That one was missing. 6 the pattern that shouldn't be. That afternoon, I drove to the base library, not the public access wing. The back room where no one really goes anymore, where the walls hum with outdated wiring and the carpet still smells like real tape and dust. I logged in using my old credentials. They hadn't expired, not completely. I wasn't here to break security. I didn't need classified files. I only wanted the stuff no one bothered scrubbing, training logs, archived protocols. Simulation reports that sat forgotten unless someone went digging. I went digging. I pulled up every flight that had passed through Sector Delta 3, the same zone Dana's helicopter went dark over. I looked for signal irregularities, and found more than one. 3 other flights had reported transponder anomalies in the same region over the last 18 months. Each time, the malfunction was blamed on routine weather. Each time, the aircraft had flown through a known comms blind spot. Each time, the deck unit assigned to manage signal relay had been calibrated just a few weeks earlier. Same technician, same checklist, same boilerplate report. CW4 jarred Mally. It was too clean, too consistent, like someone had copied and pasted the same excuse again and again. I cross-checked Dana's logs with those other flights. The same equipment, the same zone, the same drift. And then I saw it. Her flight was approved for rerouting manually that morning. It had been signed off by someone higher up. I blinked at the name. Commander Arkeen, Dana's squadron lead, the man who cried at her memorial, the man who hugged my father like a brother. He had approved her flight path switch 3 hours before she died, and no one mentioned that either. I printed everything I could without raising flags. It wasn't hard. No one was watching. I left the folder at home, quietly on top of the dryer. My mother passed by it that evening and didn't say a word, but she didn't move it either. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number, Virginia area code. I almost didn't answer, but something in me knew. "This is Commander Seth Lang, Naval Systems Safety," the voice said. Clear, no hesitation. "Am I speaking to Ava Morgan?" "Yes," I said, standing without realizing it. "We received metadata attached to archived signal logs from Commander Dana Morgan's final flight. The packet matches your signature. We'd like to speak with you in person." He didn't ask, he instructed. We met the next day in a small operations building near Norfolk. No insignia on the outside, no reception desk, just a gray door that buzzed open from the inside. The room was cold, quiet, tiled in a way that made every step sound like a decision. Commander Lang sat at a bare metal table. He didn't shake my hand. He slid a folder across instead. "You're not the only one who noticed the signal drift," he said. I opened it. Inside were logs, maps, printouts of the exact anomalies I had flagged. "But you're the only one," he continued, "who connected the drift to the faulty deck relay and to the manual override logged under Keen's clearance." I looked up. "You've known." "We had pieces, but no thread. You connected it." He didn't sound relieved. He sounded like a man confirming something he didn't want to believe. I asked the only question that mattered. "What now?" He paused, then said, "That depends on whether you're ready to carry this forward." My voice was steady. She trusted me. I owe her the truth. Lang nodded once. Then he unlocked the drawer and placed a clearance badge on the table. It had my name on it. And below that, temporary access, Naval Internal Audit, Level 2A. They gave me a laptop. No label, no serial, just clearance and silence. I worked in borrowed rooms, storage closets, empty briefing bays with flickering lights and peeling maps, places that didn't ask questions. The laptop hummed with data. Every time I touched it, I felt like I was pressing on old scars the system tried to hide. I started with the relay logs, then moved outward. Every incident in the last 14 months that involved transponder anomalies in the eastern sectors. I traced flight paths, overlaid comms data, signal strength, weather conditions. Patterns emerged. 6 aircraft, 3 types, all with mid-flight reroutes, all logged with routine justifications, all signed off last minute. Every one of them passed through the same corridor Dana had. Sector Delta 3. I pulled maintenance records. The deck relay unit assigned to that zone had been flagged for calibration 5 times in 14 months. 5 times. Same technician. CW4 jarred Mally. Same resolution note. Unit realigned. No further issues. Boilerplate, copy-paste. I dug deeper. Mally had transferred 3 months ago. No reason listed. No replacement assigned. I flagged it. Lang nodded when I brought it to him. We've had eyes on him, but nothing stuck, until now. I kept going. Flight assignments. Change logs, who reassigned what, when, Two of the most recent reroutes had been pushed through by the same operations lead, Commander Keene, Dana's squadron leader. The man who hugged my mother at the chapel like family. He had signed Dana's last route change, 3 hours before she took off, and he'd done it before, twice. Same pattern, same signature, same silence after the crash. I sat with the report. Every fact confirmed what I didn't want to say out loud. Dana hadn't just been unlucky, she'd been sent into a corridor that had failed before, that had been flagged, that should have been shut down, and someone made sure she flew through it anyway. I didn't cry, I typed, then printed the report, not for revenge, not even for justice, just the truth, so that the next name printed on a memorial wouldn't be followed by silence. The briefing room wasn't large. No glass walls, no seals on the door, just 4 officers, a table, and a stack of paper that held the weight of everything I'd found. Lang sat across from me, silent, reading. When he finished, he looked up. "You understand what this means?" "I do." "You understand what it could cost?" "I do." He tapped the final page, the one with the names. "You still want to sign it?" "She was my sister." That was all I needed to say. Lang nodded once. And with that, the report moved forward, not to the press, not to the public, but to the systems that actually mattered. Internal safety, command audit, chain of responsibility, no headlines, no noise, but inside the Navy, names moved. Quietly, Keene's unit was reassigned. Mallay's history flagged. The sector Dana flew through was pulled offline for review. Officially, it was labeled routine recalibration. Unofficially, everyone who mattered knew why. 2 weeks later, a notice went out. A remembrance ceremony, not just for Dana, for all aircrew lost to preventable lapses. I almost didn't go, but something in me said this wasn't just about her anymore. At the door, I gave my name. The officer scanned the list, paused, then straightened. "Right this way, Ms. Morgan." I followed him into the hall. Commander Lang stood at the podium. He didn't use a teleprompter. He didn't read from notes. He looked at the crowd, then looked at me. "Every system has blind spots," he said. "Every institution, every team, every mission. And sometimes it takes someone unwilling to look away to help us see." He paused, then said my name. "Ava Morgan, please stand." I did. The room was silent. Then it was. Applause didn't come all at once. It started slow. 1, then 3, then the rest, even my mother. She stood near the back, hands clasped, watching me. Not like I was a ghost, but like she finally saw me. When I returned home, the house was quiet again. No flags, no speeches, just dust settling in corners no one had touched in years. I walked into the kitchen, still in the same clothes from the ceremony. I wasn't ready to change yet. On the table, beneath a chipped coffee mug, lay a folded note. No envelope, no signature. Just a piece of lined paper torn from the notepad my father used to track fuel mileage. It said only, "She would be proud. So am I." I read it twice, then left it there. I didn't cry. I didn't stay. I went upstairs, packed the last of my things, and closed the door behind me. Not angrily, just finally. Epilogue, both names carved. I visited her grave 1 week later. The cemetery was quiet. Just the wind and the faint rustle of leaves. Her stone was simple. Commander Dana Morgan. Courage without compromise. I knelt beside it, set down a small laminated photo of the relay schematic we worked on together. The one she'd used on her final mission. Then I whispered, "They see it now, both of us." I stood, straightened my coat, and walked back toward the gates. No guilt, no fear, no need for permission, just purpose.